Right now, as you listen to this, you are only using about 5% of your brain's conscious attention.
Just 5%.
Yeah, 5%.
Yeah.
The other 95% is running entirely on autopilot. And I want you to imagine that, that precious 5% as the tiny bucket of water.
Okay, I like that visual.
Right. And ideally, you carry this full bucket into a project at work, and you pour all of that focused, conscious energy into getting the job done.
Uh-huh.
But, well, in the modern workplace, it's like someone has poked a dozen tiny holes in your bucket.
Oh, absolutely.
Every ping from a messaging app, every email notification, every time you have to pivot from a spreadsheet to a video call, that's a slow, steady leak.
Just draining it away.
Exactly. And by the time you actually sit down to do the deep, complex work that really matters,
Yeah.
your bucket is completely empty. I mean, you're drained before you've even started.
It's a profound biological bottleneck. And the tragedy here is that when we hit that wall, when we find ourselves staring blankly at a screen at 2 in the afternoon, we almost always blame ourselves.
Oh, 100%. We think, I just lack discipline or I need more coffee.
Right. Or that we just need a better time management app or something. We end up treating what is essentially a structural failure as a personal character flaw.
Which honestly brings us perfectly to our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking the concept of human sustainability, and we are heavily drawing on Dr. Jonathan H. Westover's really fascinating research on this.
It really is groundbreaking stuff.
It is. The core question we are trying to answer here is, how can organizations actually reduce our mental burden without sacrificing performance? Okay, let's unpack this, because the solution isn't just some generic HR mandate to work less.
No, it's not that simple.
Right. We're dealing with an invisible epidemic of cognitive overload, and we basically have to figure out how to patch the holes in the bucket.
Yeah, and to patch those holes, we really need to look at the water itself. That 5% of conscious attention we just mentioned, that is what materializes your awareness.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning it allows you to process new information, make complex decisions, regulate your emotions, and it is entirely finite. You cannot magically generate more of it on demand just because your boss asked you to.
You can't just will yourself to have more RAM.
Exactly. So in cognitive psychology, we break down the demands on this limited resource into 3 categories of load. First, you have intrinsic load.
Okay.
This is the inherent, unavoidable complexity of whatever task you are doing.
So that would be like the difference between trying to solve a complex calculus equation versus doing basic addition. The calculus simply requires more mental bandwidth inherently.
Precisely. It is just built right into the task. Then the second category is germane load.
It's your main.
Right. This is the cognitive effort required to actually learn and build new mental models. It's the energy your brain uses to synthesize information and turn it into permanent knowledge.
Okay, so that sounds like a good thing.
It is. It is a highly productive use of your attention. But then we hit the third category, which is extraneous load.
Ah, here we go.
Yeah. These are the completely unnecessary demands placed on your attention by things like confusing instructions, poorly designed software, or just a chaotic work environment.
I always think about this like a video game. Because if your job is a video game, the intrinsic load is the difficulty of the boss fight you're currently facing. It's supposed to be hard. That's the job.
Right. That's what you're paid to do.
Exactly. And the germane load, that is the experience points, the XP that you're gaining to level up your character so you can fight better bosses later. That is good, productive friction.
Spot.
But the extraneous load, well, that is trying to play this difficult boss fight with a laggy, broken controller where half the buttons stick. I mean, it doesn't make the game more rewarding. It just makes it infuriating.
That is a brilliant visualization. Extraneous load does not contribute to the goal at all. It actively obstructs it. And the fundamental crisis we are seeing across the modern workforce right now is that organizations are systematically handing out broken controllers to everyone.
To everyone.
Yes. The environment itself is draining the conscious attention of employees before they even attempt the intrinsic work.
So if the environment is the broken controller, we really need to identify the sticky buttons, right? Like, what exactly is draining our bandwidth so aggressively right now?
Well, the primary driver is the absolute explosion of digital communication platforms. It creates what psychologists call massive switching costs.
Because we're on so many at once.
Exactly. We aren't just dealing with a unified inbox anymore. We are monitoring instant messaging, project management software, video conferencing, email, all simultaneously.
I have to admit, I always thought I was just naturally great at multitasking. I used to pride myself on keeping a Slack window open right next to a script I was writing.
Mhm.
But you're saying every time I jump from a document to a message, I'm actually paying a biological penalty?
A very severe penalty, yes. The human brain cannot actually multitask. It just can't. It simply task switches very quickly. So every time you pull your attention away from that script to read a message, your brain literally has to dismantle the cognitive framework of the script, load the context of the new message, and then reverse the entire process to go back.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. That disengagement and re-engagement burns through your conscious attention at an alarming rate. You are emptying the bucket just to orient yourself.
And it isn't just the software either. Because Dr. Westover's work points out that the very structure of how we work has changed. He specifically points to flattened hierarchies causing role ambiguity.
Right.
Which, I mean, that sounds incredibly corporate.
Mhm.
But as I understand it, because we don't have these rigid step-by-step routines dictated by a strict boss anymore, we're constantly having to figure out our own priorities.
And that lack of structure is a hidden cognitive tax. When an employee has to spend, say, 20% of their day just trying to decipher what is most important,
Right.
or they're seeking approval across blurred departmental lines, they are burning through germane load, that productive learning energy, just navigating the bureaucracy.
That's a huge waste.
It really is. And the scariest part is the invisibility of it all. Because if you work a physically demanding job, your muscles ache. You know you are depleted. But cognitive depletion is silent.
You don't feel it in the same way.
No, you don't. It primarily hits knowledge workers and frontline managers, and the only symptoms are a slow degradation in decision-making quality, a spike in errors, and a total collapse of creativity.
But wait, if we are so cognitively depleted, shouldn't our brains just naturally rely on mental shortcuts? Because I know evolutionary psychologists talk about heuristics all the time, these automated shortcuts our brains take to save energy. Isn't that a good thing when the bucket is empty?
This raises an important question because you are touching on a very crucial survival mechanism here. Under normal, healthy conditions, heuristics are essential. You don't consciously analyze the physics of turning a doorknob. You just do it.
Right, sure.
But under extreme cognitive strain, when your mental resources are chronically depleted, relying on heuristics crosses over into systematic bias.
Wait, how so? How does a shortcut become a bias?
Because your brain stops analyzing new data entirely. You start making assumptions based on outdated patterns, like if a manager is cognitively exhausted, they won't carefully evaluate a new proposal, they will just default to whatever they did last year.
Oh, I see. They just take the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Furthermore, when you are constantly operating in a state of depletion, surviving entirely on shortcuts, you destroy what cognitive scientists call the mental incubation space.
Incubation space, like a greenhouse for the brain.
Essentially, yeah. It is the untaxed mental breathing room required for innovation. Creative problem solving requires the capacity to let your mind wander, to explore novel connections, to consider unconventional approaches.
You need slack in the system to be creative.
Yes. When your attention is 100% consumed by immediate demands, exploratory thinking becomes biologically impossible. Organizations are actively sacrificing their future adaptability because their employees literally do not have the mental space to incubate new ideas.
So we are basically burning out our hardware. And since we can't just, plug in a new hard drive and upgrade our biological RAM, we need a way to boost performance and handle the workload without adding to the extraneous load.
And the pathway forward there relies heavily on that 95% of subconscious processing we discussed at the beginning.
Right, the autopilot.
Exactly. Stokovich and Starkovich published a fascinating study in 2025 detailing a concept known as aligned priming.
Aligned priming.
Yes. The strategy is to use subtle environmental cues to activate objectives in an employee's mind without them even consciously realizing it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the stats they found in that study aren't just marginal gains. When these primed goals, these subtle environmental cues, align with the explicit goals a person is assigned, performance jumps by 15 to 30%.
It's massive.
It is, and that applies across creative tasks, logical reasoning tasks, even physical tasks like typing accuracy. A massive jump in output with no measurable increase in cognitive load.
It works entirely through the brain's associative memory networks. Think of your brain as a massive web of connected concepts. If your environment subtly and consistently reinforces your explicit goal, it activates the relevant behaviors automatically.
So you don't have to think about it.
Right. It bypasses the 5% of conscious, attention-draining effort entirely.
Microsoft actually tested this
Yeah.
completely by accident, and the mechanism is wild. They didn't change their product at all, they just redesigned their customer support systems.
Yeah, this is a great example.
Instead of instructing reps to simply close cases, they changed the underlying terminology across all their internal systems, the documentation, the dashboards, all of it, to emphasize customer success and customer outcomes.
They aligned the ambient environment with the ultimate goal of actually helping the customer, rather than just clearing a queue.
And what happened?
The result of that subtle semantic shift was a 12% increase in customer satisfaction. But more importantly, the support staff reported zero extra perceived difficulty. The environment was doing the heavy lifting subconsciously. It was, effectively, a cognitive free lunch.
But, okay, if subtle words and cues can boost our performance for free like that, it implies that the wrong words, like a mismatched environment, can actively sabotage us without us even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely. That is the danger of misalignment. It creates a state of chronic cognitive dissonance. The research demonstrates that if you explicitly tell an employee to focus on meticulous accuracy, but the environmental cues like the communication norms, the pace of emails, the software interface, if they subtly scream speed, the brain gets deeply conflicted.
It's like driving with one foot slammed on the gas and the other on the brake. You are burning through fuel, but the car is just shuddering in place.
Yes. And the result is that accuracy actually drops by 10 to 15%, while cognitive load skyrockets.
Because you're fighting yourself.
Exactly. Because the brain is forced to use conscious bandwidth just to suppress the conflicting subconscious cues. Deloitte encountered this exact phenomenon and conducted what is known as a priming audit.
Okay, a priming audit. Walk me through how that actually works.
Sure. It is a comprehensive assessment of physical spaces, digital interfaces, and social norms to identify what goals are truly being primed as opposed to what leadership claims the goals are.
Right. What's actually happening on the ground.
Exactly. So Deloitte was officially preaching work-life integration and burnout prevention to their consultants, but when they audited their environment, they found massive, systemic misalignments.
Yeah, I saw this in the source. Leadership was constantly sending late-night emails, which implicitly told everyone they needed to always be online. And they found that their conference rooms were literally named after famous historical workaholics.
Unbelievable, right.
The physical and digital environments were priming continuous availability and exhaustion, while the explicit HR goal was balance. I mean, the dissonance was just draining the staff.
What's fascinating here is how they fixed it and the metrics that followed. They didn't just launch another wellness seminar.
Right, no more yoga classes.
No, they changed the environment to remove the dissonance entirely. They implemented delayed email sending across the company, so late-night drafts wouldn't actually hit inboxes until morning.
Smart.
They renamed the conference rooms to honor balanced high achievers. They revised their recognition criteria to stop rewarding just the sheer number of hours worked.
So they aligned the subconscious cues with the explicit goals. What did that actually do to the metrics, though?
It resulted in a massive 23% drop in perceived cognitive overload among their employees. And here is the really crucial takeaway for any organizational leader listening. Client satisfaction ratings remained entirely stable.
Wait, really? No drop in performance?
Yeah, none. They reclaimed almost a quarter of their workforce's cognitive capacity without losing a single step in operational performance. They simply removed the broken controller.
That is incredible. So doing a priming audit and fixing the environment is clearly a huge win. But, eventually you do have to sit down and do the work itself, the emails, the meetings, the projects. How do we design the daily grind to actually protect our brains?
Building cognitive capacity through task design really requires looking at how we sequence and physically manage our work. One highly effective method is routinization and strategic batching.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, if you group similar tasks together, like designating specific bounded periods just for processing emails or reviewing code, you eliminate those massive switching costs we discussed earlier. You allow the brain to stay in one context.
It's also about matching the physical format of your work to the cognitive demand, right?
Yeah.
Like just deciding whether to sit or stand for a meeting completely changes the cognitive drain.
It absolutely does.
For straightforward, quick decision issues, standing meetings are biologically more efficient. They increase arousal and urgency. But
Yeah.
for complex problem solving, seated meetings are required because they allow for the sustained, relaxed attention needed to process germane load.
Yes.
And seeing how companies apply these concepts in the real world is where this really clicks for me. Take Toyota, for example.
Toyota is a phenomenal case study. They adapted their famous manufacturing systems for their knowledge workers, implementing a cognitive Kanban.
The cognitive Kanban.
Yes. They physically restrict their engineers to only having 2 active design problems at any given time. Anything else goes into a queue.
Why specifically two, though?
Because it respects the strict biological limits of human working memory. By capping active tasks, they completely prevent context switching. The engineers aren't holding 5 incomplete problems in their heads simultaneously.
And how did the engineers react?
The teams immediately reported much higher problem-solving quality and significantly less stress, simply because the extraneous load was eliminated.
Atlassian took a slightly different approach, but with really similar results. They implemented company-wide Focus Fridays. They just banned internal meetings and strongly encouraged reducing all internal communication on that day.
A complete communication fast.
Yeah. They recognized that while collaboration is valuable, constant communication is a massive source of extraneous load.
And by giving people a rhythmic, guaranteed break from the switching costs of collaboration, the results were striking. 76% of employees reported getting more complex, deep work done. And counterintuitively, their overall project delivery timelines actually improved, despite having 1 less day of meetings.
Because they actually had time to do the work.
Exactly.
Then you have KPMG, who tackled the human element directly. They rolled out a cognitive fitness training program. They taught their employees the actual science of cognitive load. They showed them how to do personal priming audits of their own digital desktops and how to spot the early biological warning signs of overload before they crashed.
That empowerment is key.
Right. And 6 months later, those trained employees reported 31% lower perceived demands, and their quality reviews showed 18% fewer errors on complex analytical work.
These interventions, Toyota, Atlassian, KPMG, they all share a common vital thread. They recognize the absolute necessity of what researchers call organizational slack.
Organizational slack.
Yes, this is surplus capacity actively built into the system. The most famous example, of course, is Google's 20% time, where engineers can take 1 day a week to work on unstructured personal projects.
Okay, I have to challenge this because to a lot of people and definitely to a lot of shareholders, the word slack just sounds like a polite corporate rebrand for inefficiency.
I hear that all the time.
Right. I mean, if I'm a CEO, how do you convince me to pay my staff to do non-urgent things or to just sit around recovering?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to return to the biological reality of how the human brain functions. Cognitive resources require replenishment, just like physical muscles do.
Right.
If an athlete sprints a marathon, you do not ask them to immediately sprint another one. You enforce recovery. Mental slack is not inefficiency. It is essential biological recovery and exploration time.
It's rebuilding that incubation space we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Organizations that try to maximize short-term output by eliminating all recovery time are actively destroying their own adaptive capacity. When a system, whether it's a massive server farm or a human brain, operates at 100% maximum capacity with no slack, it shatters the moment a single unexpected demand arises.
So what does this all mean? The macro shift here is profound. We really have to start treating human cognitive capacity the exact same way we treat environmental sustainability. It is a finite, precious, easily polluted resource.
It really is.
We wouldn't dump toxic waste into a local river and expect it to magically keep providing clean drinking water. By that same logic, we cannot dump endless notifications, mixed messages, and unprioritized tasks onto our workforce and expect clear, innovative thinking.
Unilever is currently modeling this strategic shift beautifully, by the way. They have started using cognitive load impact statements when planning major organizational initiatives.
Kind of like environmental impact statements, but for brains.
Exactly. Before rolling out new enterprise software or restructuring a department, they systematically evaluate the attentional toll it will take on their people. They track error rates and perceived pressure as leading indicators of system health.
And does it work?
It does. And their success proves that economic performance and human well-being aren't mutually exclusive. You simply do not have to burn people out to be profitable.
To you listening to this right now, if you constantly feel overwhelmed at work, if your bucket is empty by noon and you are frustrated with your own lack of focus, I want you to hear this loud and clear based on the research. It is very likely not a personal failing.
No, it's not.
It is a system design flaw. You are being asked to navigate an environment filled with misaligned primes, endless switching costs, and zero productive slack. You're being handed a broken controller and told to win the game.
And as we look to the future, I want to leave you with a final thought to consider. We are currently in a global rush to integrate artificial intelligence into every possible workflow. The stated goal is always to process information faster, to accelerate our output.
Right. But as the speed of information accelerates exponentially, what if the ultimate bottleneck in our future economy isn't computer processing power, but our own biological bandwidth? How will you protect your mind's real estate tomorrow?